We're live. Take it away.
This is Literary Roadhouse. One short story once a week. I'm Colette.
And I'm Gerald.
I'm Maya.
And I'm Anais.
And this week we're joined by Colette Sotor, who our listeners may be familiar with. We've discussed two of her brilliant short stories, La Cuesta and Cantada, and Once Removed. Colette is an award-winning short story and essay writer, and her work has appeared in numerous publications, including the Chicago Tribune, Kenyon Review Online, Carve, Gerald's favorite, Slice, and Colorado Review. She teaches at UCLA Extension Writers Program as well as privately, and is executive director of Cinestory Foundation, a mentoring organization for screenwriters and TV writers. For more information, please visit ColetteSartor.com. Welcome to the show, Colette.
Thanks for having me.
So exciting.
We are so excited to have you.
I'm going to try to keep the laughing to a minimum. I'll try to.
It's fine.
You know what? So it's a lost cause. I'm already on this show. Every once in a while we get a negative comment. It's usually that Maya laughs too much. So, you know, the audience is used to it.
Okay, good. That's heartening.
Yeah.
So, Colette, I'm curious. Have you read this story previously? Is this why you suggested that we read it for the show?
I actually have. I teach this revision and submission class where you work on one story, and at the end of the class, it's called press send. At the end of the class, you press send. You have to submit it. And I was looking for a story. I've got this thing that I do when I'm talking about revisions where you want to look for the time clocks and the detail threads in your stories. And I think I heard someone online talking about this story, and I thought, Proxy weddings. I've never heard of that. And I love Maile Meloy, so I went and I read it, and I just, as a teaching device, it was fabulous. And then the more I read it, the more I loved it, because I love William. I mean, William is just, I fell in love with him. I read him, I thought, Bridie, what are you thinking? I would have fallen in love with him.
Yeah. We're going to have so much to talk about with this story. And at that, we should probably do the summary because we haven't introduced the story that we read this week.
Yes, true.
We read The Proxy Wedding. Who's doing the summary?
I'm doing it. But just real quick, I'm always doing the plug. I'm going to sit down with an interview with Colette that will be available on Patreon for our Patreon subscribers. If you support us on Patreon, you get access to exclusive early access content like guest interviews. Okay, so this week's story. We're discussing the Proxy Maile. I'm going to do that over again. Gerald's my editor. He's so great. On to this week's story, yeah. So we're discussing The Proxy Marriage by Maile Meloy. If you haven't read the story yet, pause the podcast, follow the link in the show notes to read the story, and then come back. So The Proxy Marriage follows William, who we're all in love with, I'm assuming, who grows up in a small town in Montana to become a pianist and composer. In Montana, while in high school, he falls in love with Bridie Taylor, an aspiring dancer and singer who wants to be in musicals. Bridie is oblivious to William's love and is dating other boys and confiding in William about her suitors in romance. Bridie's father, a lawyer who, due to a unique Montana law, performs marriages for American soldiers, asks them to be proxy stand-ins for American soldiers who are marrying their brides back home but can't be physically present at the ceremony. Bridie and William stand in for the proxies, and William's heart races and aches every time. After high school, William goes on to study music in Oberlin. Bridie goes to conservatory in Chicago. They keep in touch. When they come home, they do more proxy marriages for Bridie's father. After college, Bridie moves to New York, struggles to find roles on Broadway, loses touch with William, marries this bad guy, this whole thing, his heart's breaking. She ends up moving back to Montana when Broadway just didn't work out for her. They do one more proxy marriage that William's like, this is the last. It hurts too much. The bride and groom are watching on Skype. This whole thing is great. I love it so much. The bride and groom on Skype ask if Bridie and William do the kiss. They say that they don't. But then Bridie surprises everyone by kissing William. And then something shifts inside her. She learns for the first time that William has long been in love with her and finally sees him in a new romantic light. So cute.
Oh man. Yay. And fireworks. And then
it's a long summary because this story
was a great summary.
Felt like such
there's
a long
lot
novel.
of stuff that happens in the story. It really is a whole novel in a short story. And I think it's interesting that you use this story as a teaching tool. See, now we've done the summary. Now I feel free to ask you about it. For time stamping, because I think that's something that really stood out for me. When you are looking at short stories as teaching tools, how do you go about choosing that? Like us on this show, I feel like I've learned a lot over the last 2.5 years that we've done this show, and we pick randomly. And it seems like by picking randomly, we don't fall into similar ruts of things. How do
Yes.
you approach picking short stories when you're using them as teaching tools?
I have to admit, my first criteria is, can I read this story over and over and over and over? I have to love it. So I
Yeah.
teach, surprisingly enough, I don't teach a lot of Alice Munro as much as I love her, because she's hard. I mean, she's not the norm. And you kind of want to teach something that's a little more traditional, and then teach something that's a little more difficult to help people learn how to break the rules. But generally, I'll think to myself, what's a story where, if a particular craft element, what's a story where I can really talk about the dialogue and how the dialogue's working? Or what's a story where I can really make a distinction between plot and structure? What's a story, what's plot as in this is what the story's about, versus structure, which is this is how the story is being told. And with this one, it really was about, I needed a story, because in this revision workshop I teach, it's taking a story that's pretty advanced, because in 9 weeks, you're going to have to submit it, but still needs work. And so the thing I talk about when it comes to this particular story is, okay, let's look at your story and make sure you've got several time clocks going, not just time itself, but also something that helps keep readers anticipating. So with this one, I looked at it, I thought, oh, a ceremony. A ceremony keeps readers thinking, keeps readers anticipating, and also allows the writer to kind of shorthand. So you get that first proxy wedding, and then you get a reference to like 3 or 4 that come after it, but we don't have to hear a lot of details about it because you've already set that up. But then the proxy weddings, like, we keep anticipating them, and it keeps us moving through time. And so it was it was one other example of a non-traditional, quote unquote, time clock. Because people tend to think, well, if you want a time clock in a story, it has to be, okay, this happened on a Monday, then this happened on a Tuesday, and then this much time passed. No, it's not necessarily about that. You want to find more subtle ways of creating anticipation. And this story did a really good job of that. And then I just fell in love with it.
Yeah.
I
fell in love with it too. I really did. I cried. I felt like a total sap in public.
Yeah.
I was glad I was reading in the car and not in a coffee shop, because that was not pretty. And I just totally fell in love with it. And my other thought was, Gerald's gonna love this, because like you said, the time stamping and the plot. And Gerald, am I right?
Yes.
Yes, I nailed it.
I was going to say, because you've got the clock running, but you've got the characters changing, but they keep coming back to the same thing. And over here we had a long running series of adverts for coffee called Maxwell House, which was a guy and a woman, and the woman's just moved in, and the guy has to borrow some coffee, and think, oh, that's cute. And they, as the adverts roll on, they keep on seeing each other, and there's a frisson between them. There's something between them. You don't know what it is. And then there's oh, we touched accidentally. Oh, that's okay. It's fine. And you think, oh, come on, get together. Come on. And all the time, it just kept kneeling and drew back. And that's, so I love this story for that. And it's so well written, because at the end, when she said, something's changed, has something changed for you? And he says, no. And she thinks, what? And he said, it's always been like this. I think, oh, beautiful.
Oh, I love that line.
Yeah.
Ripped my heart out.
Yeah, beautiful.
Annie, did this story turn you into a sap?
It totally did. And the first thing I did at the end of it was like shoot a message to my boyfriend. It was just hearts. He has no idea. Right? I'm just like, oh, I'm feeling so lovely, romantic right now. He's like, great, this is great. I don't know what I did, but I'll take it.
Yeah, this story, I liked it on several levels. The first thing I liked about it was it shows the pain of this type of situation from the male point of view. A lot of things have been said, positive, negative, jokingly, about being friend zoned. You know, that phrase is kind of loaded, and a lot of people consider that pain to be selfish and rude and just another form of misogyny. And this was a really human exploration of what it is really like to be in love with somebody and be too shy and too unable to express that, and long term how that feels. You know, I thought that was beautiful. I felt for him, I felt for her, because she's searching for this thing that's right in front of her and she doesn't even know, you know. And if only he could have spoken up, she would have known.
And everyone else knew.
Everyone knew.
Yeah.
Everyone knew.
Eventually.
You know, and when they finally, like, the impetus to finally make them kiss was so precious. Even the couple, their proxies knew. In their reaction, they were snickering. And I'm thinking to myself, this was so perfect. And the tension and the buildup, Gerald was right on, because it's really, I remember those Maxwell commercials. We didn't, I don't know if they aired here, but I saw them on YouTube, and there's a Japanese equivalent with like some kind of candy, and it goes for like, I don't know, 10 or 12 commercials. And what, only it's like a joke, it's like a parody. The long man and then the short man, and actually the men end up together instead of ending up with the girl. Fantastic. And yeah, it's so perfectly Japanese. It's very, very corny. And I totally had that feel where every time there was a proxy marriage, like, is this going to be the one? Is this going to be the one? You know, and it never was the one.
It's so great because it's, in a sense, it's, and I never thought about that. I love that you're saying that, because I never thought about the fact that our understanding about the way romance works, you know, romantic stories work, that also drives this story. You know, is this going to be the one? Is this going to be the moment when they realize it's that if you were to even look at it like from a screenwriting or a TV perspective, that's a rom-com. You know, what's going to be the thing that brings them together? And normally I don't necessarily find that satisfying, but this one did it so successfully. Because you're right, it was always, is this going to be the one?
Yeah, when they go for chili after the first proxy marriage, I'm like, is this it? Like, that's when I felt like it should be. But one of the things I liked about that scene the most is I felt like the characters were very lovingly drawn, and Bridie at the first proxy marriage was so bratty, but then immediately she follows that with the scene where you understand why Bridie is this way. That's when you learn about why her mom left and the past lives thing, and you know why she's a bit skeptical of marriage and skeptical even of earnestness and goals. And then you just see Bridie in a completely new light, and it just came at the right time. And I felt like that happened a lot throughout the story, where you learned the thing you needed to learn at the exact moment you needed to before you made a really harsh judgment about anything.
Yep, I completely agree. I felt the same way.
Yeah.
And after reading so many stories, like we have read so many stories on the show, it really gives me an appreciation for just how difficult that is to do. Like, there are a lot of short stories we read that rate 4s that literally they're slightly off. One thing could have just made the whole thing coalesce together. To get the perfect timing like that, and to understand where your reader's emotions are, where they are in that story, and to have full control over the reader experience, like that to me is like mastering writing.
Oh yeah, she just knows her stuff. I mean, the story is so beautifully structured. I feel like you're right. The pacing, everything comes at just the moment you need it to come, so that what you thought you were going to feel is developed and changed into something different and something more mature. You know, because Bridie could have been very flat. You know, she could have been a very flat kind of, you know, this is the love interest and she's not interested, but she wasn't. And I totally agree. The complexity started very near the beginning when they had that conversation, and we got to see some vulnerability. And with each interaction, she got a little more vulnerable, and he got, you know, he's so afraid of being earnest. And he just dreams of one day when he could finally be free. And during that first proxy wedding, he realizes, yeah, that's not going to happen. He doesn't come out and say it, but we feel it right along with him. And there's a certain vulnerability that the author lets us in on slowly but surely at just the right moments.
I think also you mentioned that she could have been flat. He really could have been wimpy and just unappealing. Like, he could have gone in a really just gross direction, and she portrays his vulnerability with a level of strength that makes it so that he doesn't come off like a wet towel. And instead he comes off as this really sensitive guy who has his own strengths. This just doesn't happen to be one of them. And the fact that he continues to live his life despite how in love he is with her shows a certain level of strength. And I think that was important. I think, either one of those characters really easily could have just fallen apart.
Yeah, and I would add to that William also, his patience is one of his strengths. We were saying earlier, is this what's going to happen? Is this what's going to happen? It happened when it needed to, because he's right. If he had been overly earnest and made a move when she was younger, because she grew, she went from being overly confident, the world is her oyster, to getting rocked a little bit. She wasn't ready until she went through a lot of challenges. And only then could she appreciate why someone like William is really the person that you should be aiming to be with. Yeah. So his patience
even if he had the strength, it probably wouldn't have gone well, because she was kind of a mess in her youth. She probably would have messed him up, and then he would have gone on to have a gazillion marriages and a half a gazillion divorces. That wouldn't have ended well if he
Speaking from experience, perchance.
No, I've never been married, so that's one experience I won't talk to.
Haven't found the right person.
No.
Okay. Anyway, let's move on.
Oh, Gerald, I love you.
And I
as the only guy on the show today, how did you feel about William's portrayal?
Yeah,
do you feel like that was?
I was curious about that.
I was going to say that was going to be my next comment anyway. I thought he was portrayed very, very well indeed, because he had some skills. He wasn't a total wimp and a total nerd. He had some skills, and he had some abilities to create music, and he was exploring those. So he had an outlet for his creativity, and he had his life sort of progressing alongside. So he wasn't just stuck at home pining for this girl he could never have. He went to college, and he did all these things, and he was carving out a career for himself. So I quite like that. But at the back of it, she was always there. She was always there, tugging at his heartstrings. And he was, the author said that he was looking forward to the time when she couldn't do that anymore, and he was looking forward to be free and to not be held back by her. And every time he saw her, he was straight back again. So I thought it was very, very well portrayed.
I also loved that she didn't let him. The author didn't let him languish. He had a girlfriend. We got to see him in a relationship where, he liked her and he cared for this person, but she wasn't bridey, and we got to see it too.
Yeah.
So I felt like that was a really smart choice to let us see him in a different relationship, to see why, to see that, he actually does love this girl. It's not just, an unrequited crush. This is someone he's deeply in love with. Even that physical reaction he has in high school when he finds out that she's already been asked to the dance and she's accepted.
Yeah.
There's that moment where he's like, he hasn't thrown up since he was 6 years old. Oh, yeah. That's when she finds these great ways of letting us know that this isn't just some wimpy little boy who's got a crush and has nobody else in his life. This is real. Yeah, and I just thought that was wonderful.
And I like the fact that she showed us through this girlfriend, and the fact she was in his bed and he cared for her, that he wasn't dysfunctional as a boyfriend, as a lover. He was, he had good social skills, and he just his heart was forever Bridie's.
And there was also an awareness of what was happening to him that I really liked. Even when he was a teenager, he would that first line where he's looking for the day where he wouldn't be enthralled to her. He thought that as a teenager before the first Proxy marriage. And also later on, he has that whole line about the quote about Auden, who was like, even if you don't love me as much as I love you. And he's thinking about that, like, and there's that line where like the role of the human brain was to rationalize suffering. Like he's rejecting this idea that just because someone doesn't love you, loving them is enough. He's like, nah, because he's aware. He's aware of what's happening to him. And that gives him a strength and a maturity that just makes him attractive.
Yes, I completely agree. And it's funny. And when you read that line, you know, because he's knowing he's stealing himself, this is going to be the last one. He can't do this anymore. And then by the time we get to the end, he's turned that. And he said, you know, at the end, it's, you know what, being the one more in love is not such a bad thing. You know, he'll take it, you know, but that's when he finally has her. So there is that wonderful maturity of, at a certain point in life, you move on no matter what you feel because you have to live. And so, yeah, there's a beautiful strength in him. Like he's really tenacious. He endures and he's patient and he does what he needs to do.
Yeah. One thing that strikes me, because I think it was last week that my brain is fried, where Gerald had an issue with a story without a plot again. And and one thing that strikes me, as we've talked about this, you know, I have a friend that writes romance, and I was going to attempt to write romance, and she walked me through like the requisite scenes in a romance novel. And not only does this fit a rom-com, but this fits a standard romance. Like to the T. And it's done in a way that's not sappy, that's not annoying. The male character isn't abusive. The female character isn't stupid. You know, it's done in a really mature way that feels super realistic. And I think that's why it touched us so much. Like, I know that if Rami was on the show today, he would be right in line with us. I have no doubt that this would be one of like maybe 2 episodes that had a unanimous feeling on it, just because the emotions talked about in the story are so universal.
Yeah.
And so how did we feel about the writing? Oh, okay.
I was gonna say one more thing that I really liked about this writer in particular is, so this story is predominantly about this relationship, the romance, the patience, everything that's happening there. But she sneaks in all these little insights into society that are so rewarding. Like there's the one about that there must be a long compound German word for the way that large events in the world could affect your personal life, right? That's after the sergeant dies. When he talks about how he's hearing information about Bridie when he loses contact via his mother and he causes smoke signals from a small town. He's like, he says, did the smoke signals work without a mother to receive them? There's all these little things in there that really impressed me, because I know a lot of writers, when you're journaling, because I've done this, where you'll like have an idea and you're like, oh, this is a great line that I need to work into a story. I don't know what story. And then you try to fashion a story around it and that story's crap. She found a way to have a good story and then sneak these things in there beautifully.
Yeah, totally. I also love the fact that something so romantic has an undercurrent of something so tragic. You know, all these proxy marriages are happening because of 9/11, because of the war, because these couples are separated and they can't be together. They don't see these couples. They show up, they read the vows. They giggle, they laugh. He takes it seriously. Sometimes she does, sometimes she doesn't. These marriages aren't real to them until that last one, when they Skype with the couple and they see the couple, and all these emotions are loaded. And I think that's really the first time when Bridie like stops, because that couple, they wrote their own vows, and she laughs when she starts to read the vows, and then she gets to the end and she's like, oh, I'm sorry I laughed, you know, because it was so.
That was an earlier one.
That was an earlier one.
I think that was the one before. Like
she's the one before.
Up.
It was when she was older. You're totally right.
Yeah, like you can see the change in her, and all of this is happening because these couples are separated. So they have their love story because of these other couples, and there's something really sad and poignant about that to me.
Yeah. Oh, and I also really like that other moment where Bridie comes back to the small town and they're catching up for the first time in years. The first time they're speaking just before that final ceremony, and he's like, so, you know, what are you doing? She's like, oh, I'm waiting tables. And that this is making other women there happy because it confirms for them. Yeah, but it's futile to leave a small town.
Such a small town. It's she just nails, and we're never really in the small town, and yet she creates such a strong sense of it. And that's the other thing I really love about the characterization. This is so deeply in William's point of view. I mean, there's a little bit of a distance, but you know, it's pretty deeply held third person point of view. And yet we get to see Bridie change too, because he's so attuned to her. And quite frankly, because the author is so fantastic, both of them change over the course of the story in a way that's tangible and real. And I just thought that was such a feat, you know, that was so well done.
Yeah.
Now, as far as the language, like I felt like it was written in a really artful and skillful way. The language was beautiful, but it wasn't overly flowery. It didn't, at no point did I stop and say, wow, that was a beautiful sentence. For me, a lot of times that's not necessarily a positive thing, but in this case, I felt like the emotions were so strong in the story. It really necessitated having language that kind of stood back and allowed you to just fully explore them. At the same time, it was really artful. There are certain lines that you, like Annie said, that really captured the moment. You know, when Bridie comes back and she's too skinny and it bothers him. Like that was beautiful to me. The way it was written and the way he understood, because he had played piano for the ballet, you know, that whole scene, the language is just very delicate. You know, it's not overly flowery. It's not Hemingway-esque. It just is. And I thought that was a good choice.
One thing I did have trouble with initially, strangely, was the pace, because I quite like pacey short stories and minimalist short stories. And it took me a little while to get into this, because we'd read a lot of stories that were slower paced and more flowery, and then and then this author sort of comes in with the story, goes bang bang bang, and you think, whoa, hang on, I haven't got time to take all this in. But then you think, okay, now I'm in sync with it, and it just works really, really well.
Well,
another thing I would say, I don't know if you realize this, but if you do a search on SoundCloud, there is an audio recording of this short story, and it is just as beautiful as it is written. And that is not always the case with really good short stories. There are some short stories that are amazing on paper, and then you record it and it just does not hit the ear well. This story is perfect on both mediums. And that says a lot about the language.
Yeah, and I think for me, part of the reason that kind of the very direct, simple language, it's not even simple, because it's deceptively simple, but I feel
it's
like
elegant. It's elegant. It's not like basic.
Yeah, and I feel like part of the reason it works so well is because it's the way William would tell this story. You know, it's in third person, and it's a third person story. It doesn't feel like third person mimicking first, but it's the language she chooses feels like the way William would tell this story. And he's not flowery, and he's private, and he's observant, and he doesn't always have a lot of confidence. And you feel that coming through with each line. And I feel like she's great about making sure the language portrays the character. And I love that, because I think that's,
and that's something that some of my favorite stories have really, like, you can tell the author's just having fun with words. And I enjoy that. But those stories are hell on audio. They are so difficult. I'm stopping, I'm rewinding, finally I'm giving up, and I'm going back to paper. You know, an elegant story that works so well aloud on paper. I can see this as a movie or a film. Like, this story really could cross mediums really easily. And a lot of that is, I think you're right. I think this is written as if it was William talking to you, even though it isn't. But it has that sense.
Yeah. And I think because of what Colette's saying, that it's like Williams telling the story. It doesn't. So one of my pet peeves that's probably come up in past discussions is when an author tries to force a mood layered on top instead of letting the moods come out of the story. And it's a very subtle distinction, but it's one of the things where, like, whenever I feel the story is overly affected and trying to make me feel something because of the way that the sentences are like over constructed with certain words to make you feel a certain way, right? I usually get annoyed. I'm like, no, don't do that to me.
You know, driving
she
through
doesn't
Maine
do that.
sunsets, you
Oh,
know,
I
after
hate-
the
yes,
death
don't.
of somebody.
Yeah.
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 Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get so
You
annoyed.
feel
And then,
manipulated.
yeah, I feel manipulated. She doesn't do that because of what you said. It's William telling the story, and you're feeling things because of the really artful and, you know, sort of like just skillfully placed scenes that are guiding you through your emotions without telling you necessarily how to feel. Love it. So good. Yeah.
And I think that I can see why this is such a good story to talk about time stamping. I feel like this is a story that I could sit down and really study structure with, because the story is so simple that the structure really does rise to the top and you can see it more easily. Sometimes it's so complicated you can't really see it. And so I can see why this would be really good in a teaching situation. It's funny, usually I'm not necessarily huge on stories that have this much structure, that follow certain plots this closely. Like I said, it is a typical standard romance plot, but this story shows that you can take that and make it into something really special. I'm sitting here, I'm like, this show is turning into a love fest. Is there anything negative I can see about the story? And I'm racking my head because I honestly think it was a perfect story.
I think so. I felt so good.
Yeah. I mean, I love it.
Yeah, I think sometimes stories that teach good construction don't make good stories to read. And
Yes.
I've read some stories that you think, I see what the author is doing here and how they're doing it, but actually, with this story, you're just carried along with it, and it's quite a long. It's over 6,000 words, so for us, it's quite a long.
Is it really? It didn't even feel like it.
No, I know, and it's when I looked at it, I thought, wow, how can I be near the end? Because it's just you just carried along with it. It's really, really beautifully written.
And what you're saying, Gerald, about when things feel overconstructed, they don't make great stories. For our listeners, if you want to go back and listen to our discussion of Measures of Time, half of us liked the story, half of us didn't. But the main complaint was we all agreed you could see the scaffolding. And those of us who didn't like it, I was clearly on the don't like side. That's the part that I resented, right? That's where I was like, don't do this to me. And then there's people who liked it in spite of that because they still thought the story was good. So I feel like that discussion touches on what you just said.
Yeah,
if you're going to show your underwear, at least wear something see-through over the top so you can pretend like you're covered.
Okay.
Gerald looks so confused. I don't know where that came from.
Totally
Gerald.
Anyway, that's quite all right. Yeah. Measures of Time was just hitting over the head with this is a story about time. Bang! This is a story about time, and it was
I had the mood thing. Feel sad. I was like, stop!
Oh God,
to make me feel sad.
Those stories make me crazy.
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! I can't remember if I like that story because I don't necessarily remember it.
That was the one.
Actually, that's not a good sign. Actually.
Yeah, I was gonna say not a good sign.
But you know what? I have a bad memory, so a lot of times I forget things until it comes up. So I'll forget a story until something reminds me of a story, or I'll forget a song until I start singing it. Usually, right afterwards, Gerald starts complaining. So I mean, that isn't completely abnormal, but I don't remember that story, and I don't remember it, and I don't think I hated it.
No,
you didn't. In the hate it category.
German
but
story.
It didn't stick with me. This
German story with two guys who were gay, but one had a daughter. It was her birthday.
No.
Okay.
No, it's not jogging any memory.
Okie dokie.
This is actually a kind of interesting exercise.
No.
Yeah, like what makes the story memorable? Will this story be memorable? I really love this story. I feel like it's a beautiful story and it touched me. Will I remember it next year? I don't know if I will. I might not.
I will. I will because it's so well crafted and it's a straightforward genre story. It is a love story. It is but the quality of the construction and the writing elevates it above a straightforward, this is a short love story. There is, there's a lot more to it, and as you say that,
I'm like, what makes a story memorable for me? A lot of times it is.
Did you freeze me, guys?
Did she cut out?
Yeah.
Yeah. She will.
Oh, there she's
there
back.
You're back.
Nope, froze again.
No.
Stop again, starting.
Yeah. Oh, there we go.
There you are.
I'm like, I know, I didn't go anywhere. It says live. Yeah, I was saying, I'm not sure what makes a story memorable to me. Like the stories we've read over time, the ones that really pop to mind are stories that had like amazing language that like I learned something significant from, a really strong emotion. It'll be interesting to see if I remember this story next year. Someone will have to test me.
Yeah,
I think for me, one of the things that made this one memorable, and part of it is because the reason I chose it, I chose it for a purpose. But one of the reasons it struck me to begin with was the whole, I like to learn things. I'd never heard of proxy weddings. And the double proxy and that whole circumstance I found fascinating. So it stuck in my head, and I went and I found it because I thought, oh, I've never heard of that and I want to learn about it. So I thought she made a very smart choice to pair a traditional, like you said, genre story with this great little piece of history, historical information, whatever you want to call it, with this great little situation or ceremony that not many people have heard of. So to me, I'm like, that'll stick in my mind. And I agree also the elevated construction and the characters.
Yeah.
William is
I've never heard of it either. And I don't know why. It makes total sense. Going back to like Mail Order Brides and Distant Weddings and Wars and stuff, it makes sense that something like this would exist. And it really took me aback and was really fascinating.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anything else you want to say about this story before we rate this thing?
Those are all my notes.
Yeah, it says on the proxy marriages, it says most states didn't allow proxy marriages. Montana was the only one that seemed to have allowed double proxy weddings. So that's quite. And I presume, Colette, you checked that out and
oh yeah. Well, and
of course you did.
I read an interview with her, and she said I think her husband brought it to her attention that there's this thing as such a proxy wedding, and she just thought it was the oddest thing. And it stuck in her mind, and eventually she found a way to use it, which I also love that because that's the way we are as storytellers. If you're a writer, there's always going to be something that sticks with you and you think, I want to use that somehow. So I also love the origin story of this too.
Oh yeah, because when you were saying earlier that or someone was saying about you find a great line or a great something and you try and construct a story around it. Proper storytellers file it away, and it's at the back of your mind, and it sometimes comes to the surface, but at some point in the future, bang, that's going to be the perfect line.
Yeah, but you have to wait.
You have to wait. Yeah.
Yeah, it has to earn its place,
and you have to write and write and write, and eventually it'll come.
Exactly.
Oh yes.
And pray to the writing gods.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't always answer.
That's so funny.
They need
that's what I was saying earlier. You have a great line in your head that you're confident about, but then you don't know how to work it into a story. So you build a story around one line, and those stories are always the worst. You just have to find a different story and then go back and remember, how can I put this line in there somehow?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, totally. And that right there is why authors are a fountain of useless knowledge and fragments of information. So are we ready to rate this thing?
I think so.
I'm going to rate it a 6. I can't think of anything wrong with it. And if I give it anything less than a 6, I'm going to feel like a fraud.
Same. I'm a 6.
Yeah.
I am too.
And I'm a 6 too.
6s across the board.
Yeah, I know.
Whoa.
All love this.
We needed Ray. He doesn't give 6s.
No.
He doesn't for this.
He might have
Do you think
done.
he would have given us this?
Because listen, here's another reason why I appreciate why Colette submitted this story in particular. It's a happy ending. We don't read happy endings.
Ever.
He loves happy endings.
Yeah.
He's such a romantic.
He does love
You
happy
can't ever
endings.
find them.
No, no one does
No,
that.
no, everyone's miserable.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's like being in a lesbian novel from the 30s. You know, everyone's just miserable. Dies.
Excellent. I like that. I'm going to write that down.
Okay.
At some
well,
point, I am quoting you on that.
Yes, I've written it down. It's going in something.
So I am submitting. We normally stick with literary fiction, and I work really hard to stick with literary fiction, but I'm kind of fascinated by the idea of these Hugo Awards
Mhm.
for science fiction. And
I'm
so
excited. You're right.
I'm
I
going
love
to
science
read.
fiction.
Yeah, I haven't read science fiction in a really long time. Actually, the last science fiction I read was a short story on here. I think it was
Yeah.
Octavia Butler. I think that
Yeah.
was the last one.
Oh.
And so I am submitting one of the finalists for the 2018 Hugo Awards, Carnival 9 by Caroline M. Yakum.
Mhm.
Okay.
Very good. Yeah, I'm going back to Carve magazine. Hooray!
I love
No one saw it
We
coming.
do love
Because,
Carve.
yeah, I haven't
I've
been there.
submitted it. I have so many rejections from Carve someday.
I haven't been there for a while.
Someday they will love me.
They will eventually. The story is called Sardines Sandbox Devil by Katie Young Foster from the spring.
What is the
2018.
title of that again?
Sardines Sandbox Devil.
Oh, I like that title.
Mhm.
Yeah, there you
That's an
go.
interesting
Intriguing.
title.
Mm.
It is intriguing. I'm curious. It kind of is like, you're playing Scrabble with whole words and you just toss them. That's what it's about.
So, Colette, do you have a story to submit?
The Dinner Party by Joshua Ferris.
Okay. All right. So I'm doing the game. It's really simple. It's one of my favorite true or false ones. I'm going to give you a fact about marriage, and you need to tell me if it's true or false.
Oh God.
Did I make it up, or is this true? All right.
Okay.
So I'm going to go across my screen. It goes Colette, Gerald, and Maya. So Colette, the word bride comes from the old Proto-Germanic word meaning to cook.
Ouch.
False.
That was true.
Oh, you're kidding! I wanted that to be false so bad.
I wanted it to be
Yes.
false too. But...
Every other.
Okay, Gerald.
Yes.
In the 15th century, in the Byzantine Empire, wedding gowns were made from the sheets on which the couple would consummate their marriage later that night.
No, that's false.
That is false. You always get me. You always sniff me out. All right.
That was a good one.
Mm.
Make up so many things.
You're a writer.
Yeah.
Maya, people who endure more than a 45-minute commute are 40% more likely to divorce. Did you freeze
Are we
again?
doing it by person? I have no idea what's happening. You
I
guys
think
cut out.
froze. Okay, so I'm going to give you a true or false statement. It's your turn. So tell me if this is true or false.
Okay, so it's my turn. So
Yep.
what was the question again?
So people who endure more than a 45-minute commute are 40% more likely to divorce.
True.
True. All right, Maya's on the board with a point.
Yeah,
Oh, and
yeah.
Gerald too. He got that one.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to Colette. A man married a dog in India as atonement.
I'm just gonna say true because I want it to be true.
It is true. Gerald.
Yep.
Otto von Bismarck, the Iron
Study
Chancellor of Germany, once said of marriage, if all men sin, then marriage must be the holy institution by which men practice self-flagellation and what can only be interpreted as divine repentance, though I personally find the lifelong sentence excessive.
Oh, good old Otto. Yeah, true.
False.
Oh, someone must
That
have
was
said it.
good.
Someone must have said it.
I said it, I guess.
Really? You made it up. Wow.
Yep. Okay,
Wow.
Maya.
Very good.
A 99-year-old man divorced his 96-year-old wife after 77 years of marriage because he discovered that she had an affair in the 1940s.
True.
True.
It's gotta be.
Yep. Back to
It's
Colette.
got to be true.
Yeah. A woman named Erica Latour Eiffel married the Eiffel Tower in 2007.
False.
True.
Oh, I knew that was going to be true.
Wow.
I knew it was true too. I saw pictures of her kissing it on like
No.
you know, like on when you go onto like a new web page and like weird random news stories pop up. Like there was a picture of like a woman kissing, and I guess
You are kidding
like a
me.
model of the Eiffel Tower. It was ridiculous.
What web pages do you go on?
I don't
Okay,
know.
Gerald.
I end up in random places, Gerald. I'm an author.
Okay.
It's either that
Yeah.
or serial killers. Don't look at my search history.
Oh,
Ever.
yeah. Serial killers. Those are good ones.
Yeah.
That's the good fascination. I've been down that rabbit hole. Yeah. Okay, Gerald.
Yes.
Although the tradition of wedding vows dates back to ancient history, in Australia, the standard civil vow included the words to tolerate up until 1971.
Ooh. It sounds so true
Whose
for
turn is it?
Australia. It's mine. True.
Ah,
False.
Oh.
I was going to say, I can't see any man ever, no offense, Gerald, but any man ever agreeing to say tolerate. Even my wonderfully tolerant
Oh.
husband.
I have to go back and listen to this because I have a feeling that was good.
Oh.
I'm missing all the fun.
Oh, it keeps cutting out. Well, here's yours real quick. So the tradition of exchanging. Oh no, did I do that one? Oh no, did I do that one?
No.
No, I didn't. Okay.
I don't know, but speak fast. You're going to cut out again.
Okay. The tradition of exchanging wedding rings goes back to ancient Egyptian times.
True?
True. I was also surprised.
Mm.
Yeah, that sounded true.
Back to Colette. The word groom.
Wow, that is really surprising. That goes way back.
Yeah, I know. I was surprised. I was like, really?
I think exchanging is more of like an equality thing, and I'm thinking, weren't we still chattel? Like
Yeah.
maybe,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think back, I'm like one step above banging me over the head and dragging me to a cave. So I guess, yay! Rings.
So, Colette, the
Yes,
word groom comes from the Middle English word for male servant.
Oh God, I wish. Sorry, did I say that out loud?
Yes, you did.
Oh, sorry.
And it was awesome.
Honey, my husband, darling, if you're listening, I love you.
Too late.
But I'd love you
Oh,
for
I'm in
it.
such trouble tonight.
Yeah.
Or whatever. So it comes from
Middle English word for male servant.
male servant false.
It's true, actually.
Oh man.
I think it's true.
Yeah,
Oh, I
it's so
love
weird.
that.
Mm-hmm. Gerald,
Oh,
Nero,
that's
the
nice.
Roman emperor, married a man, one of his freedmen, who took the role of the bride.
Roman?
Roman.
Yeah. Yes, true.
True.
Yay.
All right, last one for Maya, although Maya already won, but for fun. So Maya, the longest recorded marriage lasted 91 years.
So 91, that means they were super old. They could have gotten married when they were like 12 or 11. I'm going to say true.
True. You got all of them. Good job.
I
Excellent.
did.
Yeah.
See, deep down
Excellent.
inside, I am a romantic, which is why I am celibate forever. And so romantics don't bode well in this world. So we were going to be reading a 2018 finalist for the Hugo Awards. We're reading Carnival 9 by Caroline M. Yakum.
Okay.
Oh,
But
that's
before you go, I ask you, do you wish you were physically present for this podcast discussion? Do you have ideas you need to share? You can join the discussion by proxy in the comments section at literaryroadhouse.com. And are you certain you remember a past life? Tell us about it on Twitter at LitRoadhouse. And if this story felt like a novel to you and you're craving more novels, join the Literary Roadhouse Book Club, a monthly show that discussions full fiction novels. Our discussion of the Pulitzer-winning book The Sympathizer by Viet Thanh Nguyen publishes this Friday on July 6th. Also, we, like Bridie, would love to one day perform on stage doing a live recording of the show. Support our podcast ambitions and stage-ready dreams at patreon.com/Literary Roadhouse. Every bit helps. And as always, share this podcast with the gossip mongers in your small town. Until next time, read a good story.
Yay.